So aside from the spline tool, there are other curves that you may be working with while using the surfacing tools. The first one we'll look at is the project curve, and there are actually several ways to achieve what this tool does. One is of course the project curve. Another is intersection curves, which will allow you to choose the intersection between two surfaces. And the last is actually creating two surfaces and then trimming them away so that you have a boundary to choose for a 3D sketch. So I'll go ahead and extrude out the two splines that I have available. And you can see that there's an intersection between these two surfaces. If you do use the project curve option, effectively what that tool is doing is the same as if you were to extrude out these two and choose the line that describes their intersection. As I stated before, you can also use an option called intersection curves. And I went ahead and added this to my shortcut bar, but you can pull down this option from the tools, sketch tools, and intersection curves. So in this case, all you have to do is choose the two faces within that 3D sketch, and that'll create the intersection curves. You can also use the intersection curves in a 2D sketch, but depending on what you're using, in this case we're using two planar sketches, it'll simply select over whichever edge is parallel to that plane. But if you have a more complex intersection between two non-planar surfaces, then you can convert over that edge to a 2D sketch plane and you'll have a slightly different curve to work with. Another way to create this is to trim away part of the surface. And then we could simply come in, create a 3D sketch, and convert this over. The last option is the project curve. And I'll go ahead and hide out these two surfaces. And then use that option. In this case, we'll choose sketch on sketch. And that'll project out the same curve that we got from the other two operations. Typically, I recommend using the other two options, which were the intersection curves as well as the trim option with the convert entities, as it's easier to see the shape that you're working with when you produce these surfaces in advance. And generally you'll be working with a sketch to create your features, so this option will, or both of those options will allow you to create your 3D sketch. If you do use that project curve option, you also have the ability to project a sketch onto a face. So for example, I have this surface to the left, and I can come in and choose the sketch on face option, and then choose the face, and produce that curve. And once again, I could have just simply extruded out the surface and used the intersection curve or trim option as well. If you're projecting this onto a flat face, The simplest way would just be to use the convert entities or offset entities and transfer this over. The last three curve options are a curve through XYZ points, a curve through reference points, and a composite curve. So I've created a curve through reference points, and all you have to do for this is select out the points that you want, and this will produce a curve through those points. You can also simply just produce a spline and then modify that spline. And the curve through reference points is another option that I don't really use very often. If I was doing this or trying to create this geometry, I would just use the spline and then modify that spline as needed. There's also an option for curve through XYZ points. And for this, you'll simply enter in values for the location of each point, and then a spline will be approximated through those points, and you'll get this curve. The composite curve option allows you to select out a series of curves and join them together to form one curve. Once again, this is another option I don't typically use. Instead, a quick way to do this would simply be to create the 3D sketch that you need and just convert over the two edges. Lastly, you can create an equation-driven curve in either a 2D or 3D sketch. For the 3D sketch, this will be parametric, so you'll enter in values for t, say t times 3, t, and maybe t squared, and then you'll enter in your t1, which is the start, and the t2, which is the finish of the equation. Once again, you can also do this in a 2D sketch, and the other option you have is adding an explicit equation if you have a 2D sketch. So as I said before, aside from the spline, there are quite a few different options for adding curves. The projected curve options are going to be the most useful, meaning the intersection curve that we created with the two extrude surfaces, as well as the trim that we turned into a 3D sketch using the two surfaces.